At the mediation table, my brother slammed his fist down and said, "We want the restaurant, the building, the accounts, everything Grandma left you." My mother nodded beside him, arms crossed, like they'd rehearsed this moment for weeks. My lawyer grabbed my wrist under the table, whispering urgently, "Rachel, don't give in. We have a strong case." I looked at their faces, the smug confidence, the barely concealed greed. I took a breath and said, "Fine, give it all to them." The room went dead silent. My brother's smirk faltered for just a second before spreading wider. My mother actually laughed. They thought I'd finally broken. They thought the pressure had crushed me. Everyone in that room believed I was surrendering everything my grandmother spent 40 years building, but they had no idea what they were really taking. The final court date came 3 weeks later. They showed up dressed like they were going to a celebration, already whispering about renovation plans and potential buyers. I signed every document placed in front of me. My lawyer looked like she might cry. Then the courtroom doors opened. 2 IRS agents walked in with a federal prosecutor. They handed an envelope to my brother's attorney. He read it, and his face went white. He leaned over and whispered something to my brother. The color drained from my brother's face. My mother started hyperventilating. My brother turned to me, voice cracking. "What did you do?" I didn't answer. I just looked at the small pearl earrings I was wearing, the ones Grandma gave me on my 16th birthday. My name is Rachel Donovan, and this is the story of how I lost everything and won. If this story resonates with you, hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Drop a comment and tell me which moment hit you the hardest. And if you haven't already, subscribe to Revenge Begins and turn on notifications, because we've got stories coming every week that you won't want to miss. Trust me. Thanks for watching. I grew up in Savannah, Georgia, in a neighborhood where everyone knew everyone and Sunday dinners meant something. My grandmother, Eleanor Donovan, opened her restaurant in 1979 with nothing but a small loan, her mother's recipes, and a stubbornness that could outlast any storm. She called it Ellie's Kitchen, a modest place on a corner lot that served low-country cuisine the way it was meant to be made. Shrimp and grits with real stone-ground grits. She-crab soup that took 2 days to prepare properly. Fried green tomatoes that people drove from 3 counties over to taste. The restaurant became my second home before I could even read. I'd sit on an overturned milk crate in the kitchen, watching Grandma move between stations like a conductor leading an orchestra. She'd let me stir sauces, taste test for seasoning, fold napkins into perfect triangles for the dining room. While other kids spent summers at camp, I spent mine learning the difference between a roux that's ready and one that needs another minute. Grandma taught me that cooking wasn't just about food, it was about feeding people's souls. She remembered every regular customer's name, their kids' names, what they ordered on their first visit. When Mr. Patterson's wife passed away, Grandma sent meals to his house for 2 months straight, no charge. When the Johnson family couldn't afford a proper Thanksgiving, she hosted them at the restaurant after closing, a full spread on the house. That was who she was. My mother, Caroline, never understood any of it. She saw the restaurant as an embarrassment, a greasy kitchen that kept her mother working 16-hour days instead of enjoying retirement like normal people. She'd moved to Atlanta right after high school, married my father, had me and my brother Derek, and rarely visited except for obligatory holidays. When she did come, she'd make comments about the outdated decor, the worn floors, the menu that hadn't changed in decades. "Why don't you just sell it, Mom? You could travel. Relax." Grandma would smile politely and change the subject. My father left when I was 12, just packed a bag one day and said he needed to find himself. We never heard from him again. After that, my mother threw herself into a series of failed business ventures and expensive tastes she couldn't afford. Derek took after her, always looking for the quick buck, the easy path, the shortcut to success that didn't require actual work. He bounced between sales jobs, pyramid schemes, and investment opportunities that never panned out. I went the opposite direction. After high school, while Derek partied his way through a communications degree he never used, I enrolled in culinary school. I worked at restaurants in Charleston and New Orleans, learning different techniques, different cuisines, but always feeling pulled back to Savannah, to Grandma, to Ellie's Kitchen. When I was 24, Grandma called me. Her voice was different, tired in a way I'd never heard before. She'd been diagnosed with early-stage Parkinson's. The tremors were manageable, she said, but she couldn't run the kitchen like she used to. I need you, baby girl, she said. This place needs you. I moved back within a month. For the next 6 years, I worked alongside her, gradually taking over more responsibilities as her condition progressed. I handled the morning prep, the lunch rush, the evening service. I managed suppliers, negotiated with vendors, kept the books balanced. Grandma supervised from her usual spot near the pass, still tasting every dish before it went out, still remembering every customer's name. Those years were hard, physically exhausting, financially tight, but they were also the most meaningful of my life. I learned things no culinary school could teach. How to handle a kitchen crisis without panicking. How to make a customer feel welcome even on your worst day. How to keep a 60-year-old recipe exactly right while making subtle improvements Grandma approved of with a nod. When she couldn't work anymore, I brought her to the restaurant every day anyway. She'd sit in the corner booth by the window, greeting customers, telling stories, being the heart of the place even when her hands shook too much to cook. My mother and Derek visited twice a year at most Christmas and Grandma's birthday. They'd stay for a few hours, make uncomfortable small talk, then leave with vague promises to come more often. They never asked about the restaurant's struggles, never offered to help when equipment broke down, or when we had to close for a week after a pipe burst. They just showed up when it was convenient and disappeared when it wasn't. Grandma saw through them. She never said it directly, but I could tell from the way her eyes dimmed slightly when they left without offering to do the dishes, without asking if she needed anything. Once, after they'd gone, she squeezed my hand and said, "You're the only one who stayed, Rachel. Remember that." She passed away on a Tuesday morning in March, peacefully, in her sleep. I was holding her hand. She was 82 years old. The funeral was beautiful. Half the town showed up to pay respects. My mother and Derek arrived late, left early, and didn't help with any of the arrangements. At the will reading the following week, I sat alone on one side of the attorney's office, while they sat together on the other, like opposing teams. The attorney, a kind older man named Mr. Hartwell, who'd known Grandma for decades, read the terms clearly. The restaurant, the building it occupied, the house Grandma had lived in for 50 years, and all associated accounts were left entirely to me. The only things left to my mother were some family photos and Grandma's wedding ring. Derek received nothing. The silence lasted about 3 seconds before my mother exploded. "This is insane! I'm her daughter, her actual daughter. How could she leave everything, too?" She gestured at me like I was something unpleasant she'd stepped in. Derek jumped in. She obviously wasn't in her right mind. The Parkinson's affected her judgment. "We need to contest this." I said nothing, just held the documents and listened to them rage. "Mr. Hartwell tried to explain that Grandma had been evaluated by her physician, that she was fully competent when the will was drafted, that her wishes were clear and legally binding. They didn't want to hear it. They stormed out, threatening lawsuits. Over the following months, I tried to keep things running normally. The restaurant was Grandma's legacy, and I was determined to honor it. But my mother and Derek had other plans. First came the phone calls, my mother crying about how unfair everything was, how she'd been abandoned by her own mother, how she was struggling financially, and surely I could share some of what I'd taken from her. Then came Derek's visits, showing up unannounced with fake concern, asking questions about the business, the property value, the accounts. He'd wander around taking mental notes, calculating. Then came the letter from their attorney, officially contesting the will on grounds of undue influence and diminished capacity. They claimed I had manipulated Grandma during her illness, isolated her from family, and coerced her into changing her estate plans. The accusations were absurd, but they created legal chaos. For 8 months, everything was frozen while the courts sorted through their claims. I couldn't make major decisions about the restaurant, couldn't access certain accounts, couldn't move forward with repairs that were desperately needed. The stress was crushing. I was running the business on fumes while paying my own attorney to fight their baseless attacks. Sleep became rare. I lost 15 pounds. Regular customers noticed something was wrong, but I couldn't bring myself to explain that my own family was trying to destroy everything Grandma had built. The case was eventually dismissed. Their claims had no merit. Grandma's doctor testified about her mental clarity. Mr. Hartwell provided documentation showing her wishes had been consistent for over a decade, and multiple witnesses confirmed I had never tried to isolate her from anyone. But the damage was done. Legal fees had drained my savings. The restaurant had suffered during the uncertainty, and my relationship with my mother and brother was destroyed beyond repair. I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong. 6 months after the case was dismissed, my mother called. Her voice was different, sweet, apologetic, almost warm. "Rachel, honey, I've been doing a lot of thinking. I was wrong to put you through all that. I was grieving, and I handled it terribly. I want to make things right." Part of me knew better, but she was still my mother, and I was exhausted from fighting. I agreed to meet for coffee. She brought Derek, who gave a rehearsed speech about family being more important than money, about wanting to rebuild our relationship. They said they wanted to help with the restaurant, to be involved in Grandma's legacy instead of tearing it apart. They said they'd moved back to Savannah permanently to be closer to me. Looking back, the warning signs were everywhere. But grief and exhaustion make you vulnerable to hope. I let them in. It started small. My mother offered to handle some administrative tasks, answering phones, managing reservations, ordering supplies. Derek volunteered to take over the bookkeeping, saying his business experience could help streamline operations. I was drowning in work, desperate for help, and they seemed genuinely committed. Within 3 months, they'd made themselves essential. My mother chatted up customers and handled front of house while I focused on the kitchen. Derek computerized our accounting system, set up new vendor relationships, and presented monthly financial reports that showed steady improvement. For the first time since Grandma's death, I could breathe. I took a day off occasionally. I slept through the night. I even started dating someone, Marcus, a sweet guy who taught history at the local high school. Things felt stable. But numbers that look good on paper can hide ugly truths. I first noticed something wrong when a longtime supplier mentioned a payment issue. We'd ordered our seafood from Captain Mike's for 15 years. Grandma had been friends with Mike's father. But apparently, we'd switched to a new supplier 3 months ago, and Captain Mike was wondering what he'd done wrong. I asked Derek about it. He didn't miss a beat. Their prices went up. Found a better deal through a distributor out of Jacksonville. Same quality, 20% cheaper. It's all in the reports I gave you. I checked the reports. The numbers were there. The logic seemed sound. I let it go. Then there was the insurance issue. Our policy renewal came with a significant increase, and when I called to ask why, the agent mentioned we'd changed our coverage levels several months back, reducing certain protections. I hadn't authorized that. Derek said he'd discussed it with me, that I must have forgotten with everything going on. Maybe I had. My memory wasn't great during that period. More small things accumulated. Vendors I didn't recognize on statements, expenses categorized in ways I didn't understand, cash flow that seemed healthy on reports but felt tight in reality. Every time I questioned something, Derek had an explanation: bulk purchasing discounts, prepaid contracts, accounting adjustments. My mother would back him up, calling me paranoid, saying I was letting stress cloud my judgment. The confrontation happened by accident. It was a Sunday evening. The restaurant closed for the 1 day a week we didn't operate. I'd left my phone at the restaurant and went back to get it, expecting the place to be empty, but the back office light was on. I found Derek at the computer with my mother standing behind him. Spreadsheets covered the screen, not the ones he showed me, but different ones. Raw data, bank transfers, company names I'd never seen. They looked up when I walked in. The guilt on their faces told me everything before I even understood what I was seeing. "What is this?" I asked. My mother started the performance immediately. "Honey, it's nothing. Just some personal finances Derek's working on. Stop." I moved closer to the screen. The numbers were damning. Transfers to LLCs I'd never heard of. Palmetto Holdings, Coastal Consulting Group, SDG Enterprises. Payments labeled as vendor costs, going to accounts that traced back to shell companies. I'm not a forensic accountant, but I understood enough to know what I was looking at. "How much?" I asked quietly. Derek stood up, blocking the screen. "Rachel, you're overreacting. This is standard business practice restructuring for tax efficiency." I was going to explain everything. "How much have you stolen?" My mother's face hardened. The mask dropped completely. Stolen? Everything in that restaurant should have been ours in the first place. Mother made her choice, and she chose wrong. We're just correcting a mistake. Derek nodded. The restaurant, the building, the property, it's worth well over $2 million. You've been sitting on a gold mine while we struggled. We deserve our share. The argument that followed was brutal. They accused me of manipulating Grandma, of being selfish, of hoarding family wealth. I demanded full access to the accounts, all the real records, an explanation for every fake company and fraudulent transfer. They refused. My mother threatened to go public, claiming I'd been abusing Grandma before her death, destroying my reputation if I didn't agree to sell the restaurant and split the proceeds 3 ways. Derek said he'd documented irregularities in my management that he could share with the health department, the IRS, anyone who would listen. They had been planning this for months, building leverage, creating false records that made me look negligent or corrupt while they siphoned money into their own pockets. If I fought them publicly, they'd burn everything down with lies. If I gave in, they'd take everything anyway. They left that night with an ultimatum: agree to sell and split within 30 days, or face consequences. I didn't sleep at all. By morning, I had a plan. Not to fight them directly, that's what they expected. No, I would use their greed against them. The first call I made was to Marcus. I told him everything. He listened without interruption, then said the words I needed to hear. Whatever you decide, I'm with you. The second call was to Mr. Hartwell, Grandma's attorney. He recommended a forensic accountant he'd worked with before, a woman named Patricia Chen, who specialized in fraud cases. I met with her the next day, bringing every document I could access, every statement I'd saved, every report Derek had given me. She asked careful questions, made notes, requested access to bank records and tax filings. Within a week, she had preliminary findings. It was worse than I'd imagined. Over 14 months, Derek and my mother had diverted nearly $340,000 through fake vendors, inflated invoices, and direct transfers to shell companies they controlled. They'd used restaurant accounts to pay for personal expenses, a car for Derek, renovations on my mother's condo, credit card bills, even a vacation to the Bahamas listed as a supplier conference. But here's what made Patricia's eyes light up. They'd filed tax returns for the restaurant, showing expenses that didn't exist, and income that was significantly understated. They'd created a paper trail of fraud that extended to federal tax violations. Wire transfers between states meant federal wire fraud charges were possible. The amounts involved meant serious prison time if prosecutors pursued it. Patricia's assessment was clear. They thought they were being clever, but they made classic mistakes. They got greedy too fast, left obvious trails, and never expected anyone to look closely. If you report this, they're facing significant federal charges. I sat with that information for 3 days. These were still my mother and brother. As awful as they'd been, part of me hesitated at the thought of sending them to prison. Then I remembered Grandma's words, "You're the only one who stayed." I remembered the will contest, the accusations, the 8 months of hell they'd put me through. I remembered my mother's face when she said Grandma chose wrong. They had no such hesitation about destroying me. Patricia filed the report with the appropriate federal agencies. The investigation opened quietly, no raids, no announcements. Authorities verified her findings independently, building a case while my family had no idea anything was happening. Meanwhile, I played the role they expected. Tired, defeated, ready to give in. At the next mediation session, I showed up looking exhausted, agreeing to terms I knew I'd never actually fulfill. I let them think they'd won. My mother pushed for everything: full ownership of the restaurant, the building, the property. Derek wanted control of all accounts and operations. They didn't want to split it with me anymore. They wanted me out completely. Their attorney drew up transfer documents that would sign over Eleanor Donovan's entire legacy to them, and I agreed to sign. My lawyer, Sandra, nearly had a breakdown. "Rachel, this is insanity. You're giving up everything your grandmother worked for, everything you've worked for. We can fight this," I told her to trust me. She didn't understand, but she respected my decision. The mediation concluded with them getting everything they wanted on paper. My mother actually hugged me afterward, a cold, performative gesture for the mediator's benefit. "You're doing the right thing, honey. This is best for everyone." Derek shook my hand like we were closing a business deal. No hard feelings, right? It's just business. The final court hearing was scheduled for a Thursday morning. I spent the weeks leading up to it doing everything I'd always meant to do but never had time for. I took Marcus on a proper date dinner at a nice restaurant where I didn't have to work. I visited Grandma's grave and told her what was happening, trusting she'd understand. I baked her biscuit recipe one more time, just for myself, and sat in her old booth eating them while the morning light came through the window exactly the way she'd always loved. I spent an entire Sunday going through her photos, her letters, the small tokens she'd kept over 82 years. There was peace in those weeks, a strange calm that comes from knowing you've made the right choice, even when the path forward looks like surrender. The courtroom was small and functional. My mother and Derek arrived, looking like they were headed to a party, my mother in a new dress, Derek in a suit. I'm certain the restaurant's money paid for. Their attorney had all the documents ready. The judge reviewed the settlement terms. I confirmed I understood and agreed voluntarily. Signatures were gathered. Papers were notarized. It was done. They owned everything. Derek leaned over and whispered to my mother, loud enough for me to hear. First thing we do is list the property. I've already got a developer interested. My mother nodded, mentally spending money she didn't have yet. Then the courtroom doors opened. 2 IRS criminal investigation agents entered, followed by an assistant U.S. attorney. They walked directly to my brother's attorney and handed him a sealed envelope. The judge paused, watching with raised eyebrows. The attorney opened the envelope, read the contents, and his face went gray. He leaned over to Derek and my mother, whispering words I couldn't hear but could easily guess. My mother's hand flew to her chest. Derek stood up abruptly, knocking his chair backward. This is a mistake. This is entrapment. She did this, he pointed at me, voice rising. She set us up. The lead IRS agent stepped forward, speaking formally. Derek Donovan, Caroline Donovan, you're under arrest for wire fraud, tax evasion, and conspiracy to commit bank fraud. You have the right to remain an attorney, my mother started crying, great heaving sobs that were probably genuine for the first time in years. Derek tried to argue, claiming innocence, demanding his attorney do something, but there was nothing to be done. The evidence was overwhelming. The case was solid. They were escorted out in handcuffs, past the small crowd that had gathered in the hallway after hearing the commotion. I stayed seated, watching them go. Derek looked back at me once, hatred burning in his eyes. I didn't look away. Here's the part they never understood, the part that makes this justice and not just revenge. When they forced me to transfer ownership, they didn't just get the assets, they got the liabilities. Every fraudulent transaction made under the restaurant's name, every fake invoice, every tax violation, all of it, became their responsibility the moment they signed those ownership papers. The crimes were committed using the business entity. The business entity now belonged to them. Federal prosecutors don't care who owned the company when the fraud started. They care who owns it when charges are filed. My mother and Derek walked into a trap of their own making, using documents they'd fought months to obtain. They were so focused on taking everything that they never stopped to consider what everything actually included. The legal process took 18 months to fully resolve. They both pleaded guilty to reduced charges after their attorneys explained just how overwhelming the evidence was. Derek received 4 years in federal prison. My mother got 3 years, plus probation. Full restitution was ordered, not that they had much left to give after legal fees consumed their resources. The restaurant property went into federal receivership during the proceedings, but because I had documented evidence proving I was unaware of the fraud and had in fact been the victim of it, I was eventually able to reclaim ownership. It wasn't easy. Mountains of paperwork, testimony, forensic audits proving my innocence. But Patricia Chen's meticulous work paid off. She'd not only built the case against them but had also carefully preserved evidence exonerating me. I reopened Ellie's kitchen on what would have been Grandma's 84th birthday. Marcus helped me repaint the dining room. Longtime customers showed up with flowers and cards, some crying, most just happy the place had survived. Captain Mike personally delivered our first seafood order, refusing to charge me for it. Eleanor would have done the same for me, he said. The first year back was hard. The restaurant's reputation had suffered during the chaos, and I had to rebuild trust with vendors, customers, and staff. I hired a proper accountant, someone Patricia recommended, and implemented systems that made fraud impossible. I kept the books myself too, checking everything twice. Trust is something you earn back slowly, even with yourself. Marcus proposed on a random Tuesday evening, while we were cleaning up after close. No fancy dinner, no elaborate plan, just him, in the kitchen Grandma had loved, asking me to spend my life with him. I said yes before he finished the question. We got married in the restaurant courtyard the following spring, surrounded by the people who'd stood by me through everything. Grandma's picture sat on a small table by the altar. I haven't spoken to my mother or Derek since the courtroom. Derek sent a letter from prison once, 4 pages of blame and accusations that I burned without finishing. My mother tried calling after her release last year, leaving a voicemail about healing and moving forward. I deleted it. Some people believe family means automatic forgiveness, unlimited chances, unconditional reconciliation. I used to believe that too. But I learned something through all of this. Family isn't just blood. Family is who shows up. Family is who stays. Family is who sees you struggling and offers help without calculating what they'll get in return. Grandma understood that. She left her life's work to the person she trusted, to continue it not because I was biologically entitled to it, but because I had earned it through years of dedication, sacrifice, and love. My mother and Derek felt entitled to something they'd never valued, never understood, never respected. They wanted the rewards without the work, the inheritance without the relationship, the legacy without the honor. In the end, they got exactly what they deserved. If you've been through something like this, betrayed by people who should have protected you, targeted by family who saw you as an obstacle to their greed, know that you're not alone. It's okay to protect yourself. It's okay to stop giving chances to people who use them as weapons. It's okay to let consequences happen instead of shielding people from their own choices. Strength isn't always about fighting loudly. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is step back, let people have what they demanded, and trust that truth has a way of surfacing. Strategic patience isn't weakness, it's wisdom. My grandmother taught me that. And every day, when I walk through the doors of Ellie's kitchen, when I taste a dish before it goes out, when I remember a customer's name or send a meal to someone going through hard times, I honor her. Not through revenge, but through continuation. That's the real victory. They wanted everything, they got it, and it destroyed them. Meanwhile, I kept what actually mattered, and I've never looked back.